Okay, hey there. Today we are looking at this Core I MFT Managed File Transfer product that runs on your IBMi. I believe it's version 7.2, and let's jump right in. Right here we have the main menu for the when you pull it up, the product Core I MFT, and we have an environment we need to set up. This is some initial stuff to set up globally for everything else to work correctly. You need to specify a small root directory on the IFS to work out of. This allows the SFTP configuration and logs to be used in that area. Um, and then also we need to specify a user profile that the SFTP transfers are going to run under, and that is because for SSH authentication, we need to set up on the IBMi, and I guess just most any networks platforms, you have to have your keys set up per user profile and user account. And if we are able to specify a single user profile to run the transfers, then we can maintain all the keys under the same user profile instead of spreading them around to different users on the system. It's just a much more cleaner, easier way to do it for SSH authentication. And we'll get into that more later as we start dealing with the keys. There's a lot to cover in this application. There's a lot of moving pieces, so I'm just going to go through it pretty quickly to outline the main features and the major moving parts. And if there's any requests for any particular area, just shoot us an email or a comment and let us know what you want to see more in depth. Okay, so under the configuration, after you specify the user profile, of course, like with all the products, we have the tutorial pop-ups that really help guide for each screen by screen. We're going to turn that off because you got me instead of that. But if you're by yourself and you're trying to get familiar with it, you'd want to turn that on to see the pop-up tutorials to help you through. So under configuration, option one, this is a really neat feature of this application, and let's take a look at it. This is really for different protocols, FTP or SFTP. We have logs that obviously generate for each transfer, and in those logs there are specific phrases that can indicate an error. And this is a means and a function within this process to allow you to tag certain errors or whatever you want to consider an error to a friendly user message, what will flag the transfer as an error. For example, if we look at this one, this particular error, let's go into it with option 5. The log would report a remote host refused an attempted connect operation. Now, for most people, that's a little vague on the surface. So this gives you the ability to tag an error explanation to it, along with a suggested resolution to overcome that error for the next go round. And these are all preloaded with the product, and these are the the most the major errors that you're going to encounter whenever you set up a new transfer to a new server. These are the after you get through these errors, everything should just go normally, very smooth. There should be really no more errors. And if there are some freak thing that's changed or happened, and of course you can just find the log, look at the log, and determine what happened under that freak incident. But these will help you really get everything going and headed in the right track. Um, so yeah, if you wanted to add any more, you just hit F6, just like anything. And if you find a phrase in the error log, you put it here and you tag it with the suggested resolution and explanation. Pretty neat. You'll see that later on when we do a transfer. Moving on to option 2, maintain MFT file extensions. Okay, when we do an FTP or SFTP, we first move the file from the DB2 down in the IBMi. We have to move it to the IFS to make it a more universal file format. And from there, that's when it's picked up and it's SFTP'd off platform to another server. We have the ability to define our own file extensions and also have the mapping of the data or the data built from the IBMi up to the IFS in different manners. Example, we can build CSVs, we can build flat text files, we can build things we call logs that will format the information just the correct way for logging purposes. And then there's a catch-all for XXX. If it's not defined and is specified XXX, it will just fall down here and use this default. Um, Text files like .txt and what else? .bin. Those are baked in, and those are by default. If you put .txt or .bin for the file to be transferred out or come in, or for an inbound or an outbound, it's going to use some parameters that are already set up, which are standard for flat text files and binary files. So you don't have to define those here. Anything else other than text and binary, you'd want to come here and set up your own parameters. CSV gets sent as a default with the product. So you got a lot of flexibility of creating your own file definitions. Okay, moving on. Maintain SSH keys. This is a very handy one. Let's get into this real quick. We can't just cover everything, but we'll jump in there and take a look. Okay, when you first go in, the particular user profile that we're using is it's going to go ahead and start showing all the keys that are set up for it. And right now we have these set of keys that are set up for it. What we can do is we have the ability to tighten or loosen security on this, because the security is very touchy on this. And when you start manipulating these files, you got to make sure everything's set back the correct way, or even though everything's in place, when the SFTP transfer fires, it will be unsuccessful. And it's very hard pinpointing exactly why it didn't work, but it's usually because of if it's not something in the list of defined errors that we set up, it's something to do with authorization and permissions on the files. So this simple thing, you come in here, you hit F7, you know you've got the permission set correctly on all the files and the directories. Let's see. All right, generate new keys, simple. Hit F8. You're going to generate a new set of public and private keys under this user profile. When you're done with that, it'll simply pop up here. You can rename the key, and that's very important for this product because the keys we use are related to the FTP IDs that we set up. FTP IDs are the main configurations for a server transfer. It'll define the host, the username, password, and whether you're using key authentication. So this particular key right here, there is an FTP ID up there set up out there called ISGN_S, and this is the private key for it, and this is the public key for it. And so that way you can have as many FTP IDs set up, as many servers and connections as you want. And as long as those FTP IDs have unique names, you can create different keys here for all those different servers and maintain them under one user profile. Again, that's what I was speaking at the very beginning. It's very important to have one specific user profile. That way, the SSH key management will not be nightmare and spread all over the place. So anyway, that's how that works. And then you can do a rename key. So obviously, when you create it, it's going to create it with the default naming. So you'll simply just give it a new name according to your FTP ID that you've set up in the other menu option. We'll get to that. Oh, and here's a little reminder of how you do that. It's going to be the FTP ID underscore SA public or private, just like this one here. You can look at the file, simply just go out, give it a 5, and you can see the contents of it. That is the known host for this. Another important thing is when you set up a new key, SSH key, and you go immediately into doing a transfer with that key, it's not going to work. You've got to verify a connection with that particular key before the transfer will work. So we have a nice verification, remote server verification function within the FTP ID setup itself. We'll get to that. That's going to be handy. Display, copy. You can simply copy the key to another user profile if you absolutely have to. Again, we like to keep everything under one particular user profile, but you have the option to spread keys around if you need to. A lot of times when you generate new keys, the process is you hang on to the private key, you send the public key to the remote server. So with this very handy option right here, you would just put the email address in of whoever you want to send it to, tag the public key with the 7, put your address in there, hit enter, boom, it's going to send the public key right to the remote server administrator at their email address. Very cool, very handy. All right, let's hop out of this. That's only for key authentication. You can also do password authentication, which is much simpler to set up, but you compromise security with that. Option 4, deploy monitor. You have the ability to deploy 2 different types of monitors. One's a miscellaneous, which allows a miscellaneous monitor to sit there and run in the background, and then it will just simply every now and then wake up and it will execute a file transfer for you, SFTP or FTP, it doesn't matter. and it will go out to any server and it will bring files in or send them out. But typically it's used to bring files in. If you have a vendor or something that you've coordinated a transfer with them and they're going to drop files on your server, then you set this inbound monitor up to sit there and monitor your server and bring the files in when necessary. It's just a listener. And again, there's some text help with that, but you when you're ready on your system, you'd just specify MSC, probably Core I MFT for the library, and then you'd hit enter, and it would deploy a subsystem and a job queue for that particular monitor, and it's going to set up it's going to set up some control records to work with those monitors. That's on the other side of the menu here. So we're not going to do that, but okay, let's jump into 5. This is the heart of this application right here, the FTP IDs. So if we take option 5, first thing we see is we've got some FTP IDs that are going to ship with the product, and these are for the inbound monitors. I'm not going to get into those. Probably going to save those for a different video because that's one kind of big subject on its own. But let's look at this particular FTP ID we got set up for our test transfer. It's active, obviously. It's a protocol of S. We've got 4 different protocols: SFTP, F for FTP, I for import from the IFS down to the IBMi, or an E, which is taking data from the IBMi up to the IFS. So let's look at the contents. Let's just get into here. And so we've got our server, we got the typical server information. The screen is for the server. What server are you connecting to? And it's an SFTP. This is the server. Port, typically 22 with SFTP. You've got your username. This one's set up on password. This is a password authentication. We've got it stored in there. It's masked, obviously, for security. But you can also, if you simply want to use a SSH key, you just simply go wipe that password out, and then it's going to look for an SSH key for authentication when it tries to connect. It's going to generate the script to this library under this script member and log, and then you have the option of specifying an email address for transfer statuses. For all, failure, success, or in for none. We don't have that set up, but every time this transfer runs, if it encounters an error, let's say, it's going to map the error to whatever you have defined up in the defined errors, and it's going to tag the the explanation and the resolution, suggested resolution, to that email. So whoever gets these notifications can clearly see this thing failed. Here's the error explanation, and here's the suggested resolution for this error. It's really good if you've got a support staff in place that's not real familiar with how the inner workings of file transfers. Okay, with that, let's do it. Here's a verify connection. You can do a verify connection for either password or with the SSH key. If you hit F9 here to verify this remote server, it's going to tell you what's going to happen if you're doing password authentication or if you're doing an SSH key authentication. Basically, it's going to execute a particular API that's going to go out and do this connection, and it loads a lot of data in the transfer log where this tells you exactly what to pinpoint to be sure your connection was correct. And it also, the reason why we did it this way is so you can also see all the other information that comes along with it. So you can interpret it to your own translation and look for any particular thing you're trying to find. We just didn't want to say, yes, your verification, your server verified connection. We didn't want to give you a yes, successful, or F or fail. We want you to give you all the information for the attempt so you can take a look at it. So if you hit enter here, it would attempt that verification. We're not going to do that. We know we're good. Okay, from here, you're wondering about the files. Which files are going to get transferred? This is the server information. So if you hit F8, script details, we've got one file. You can, obviously, this is scalable to your needs. You can put as many files in here as you want, gets or puts. It's going to, when you run the FTP ID, it's going to establish a connection for the server you just defined, and then it's going to do puts or gets for as many detail records as you have in here on that one connection. So let's look at and see what we got. This is a put. Obviously, we're going to put this. It's active. You can inactivate or activate records. Let's see. We're going to pull this data from the local I. It's going to come from our DB2 on the IBMi, and we're going to move it up to the IFS on the put to this particular location, this directory, And we are going to use and this is another really cool feature about this, is you can do file naming templates. And for this particular one, let's do an F4 here. For the file name that we're going to use, oops, let's go back in. Let's go here. Okay, here you can pretty much construct any type of file name that you want very easily. You can give it its own file name, which is defined on the other page, and pull it in and then tag some other elements to it, timestamps and so forth. You can pull up custom data out of your own database to tag to it, and or some free text to it. But what we've done here in this example is you can specify your own program here to build your file name, and it's going to send it right back to this FTP ID. So for this one, we've got a little demo program out there that we've created, FTP demo R, and it's just going to build this string and return it. Again, you can have your own custom programming to build any type of file name you want. If you don't want to use these simple elements here to build it, and it literally runs it, and right here it'll give you a demonstration of that's the template you're using, and this is what it would look like executed. So we've got that one. Let me show you something else when we get out of here. We'll come back to something related to that in the script. We're going to send it to the remote server directory underscore test, or I mean forward slash test. And when we're done sending it, we want to archive it on our IFS, showing that we did have a successful put process with this. One more thing to cover with this, if you see this F9 down here, this is really mostly related to the inbound process, but I'm going to save that for the inbound video. So tune in for that one for that information. Anyway, here we go. Let's back up. If you want to look at the particular script for this one file, you can just give it an option 20. And this loads the script, and it's only for this one file. If you go back to the FTP ID and you have multiple files for this transfer, and you say, let me see the script, it's going to show all the different files in there for that one script, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to connect, then it's going to run all these files. But for this particular detail one we're looking at, here's what it's going to do. It's going to generate, this is an expect script that works with password authentication on IBMi's, and it emulates terminal communication basically. Anyway, that's loaded on this. The files for using this come with your package, and you just do a simple install of those files into Pace. And then once that's loaded and you use password, it's going to build the script for you. But once it puts the simulation around your puts and gets, basically is what it's doing. It's going to, call your local directory, then your remote directory, and then it's going to put the file. Very simple, very clean, very easy to understand. You can copy these sequences to other FTP IDs. You can update them, obviously, delete them, whatever. All right, let's back out of here. Let's just do a quick demonstration of this. Let's look out at our FTP server. We're going to refresh it. This is the test directory that we're looking at. We just refreshed it. There's only one file there. It's a bin file. What we're going to do is, again, we're going to do the 20 to look at the script. And you see there's the script, and it's got the one file in it. If there were many files to this particular FTP ID, you would see them all listed here. So we're going to give it an option 10. You can execute it right here. Just execute it. Yep, let's execute it. Okay. So when you do that, it submits the transfer request to batch. So it's processing in batch. If you go on with a 2, you'll see the status down here. What I like to do is just stand here, hit F5 if you're testing, and just take a look and see when it's going to return with a successful or failure status. Hopefully it should be successful. So it's literally going out, connecting SFTP, secure transfer protocol with the other remote computer. Then it's establishing the handshake and credential, and then authenticating credentials, and then it's doing the files. So okay, there we go. Hit F5, and it was successful. And to double check and make sure it was successful, what I like to do is just go look at the last log. So option 22 is going to load every log in history. Every transfer log in history for this particular FTP ID, and just simply go to the bottom, scroll up, and find the banner for the current transfer. And here it is. It's a start of it right here. This was the prior transfer. This is the one that just ran. Here's your date stamp to ensure. There's your FTP ID we just ran, and it ran 0, so it basically says all the detail records. So here it goes. This is what happens in a normal SFTP connection with a remote server. Is the very first thing is you've got to establish a connection. If you don't, we've got preloaded error messages that give you a nice, pretty response and solution as to how to fix that. Once you establish that, then it starts trying to do SSH key handshake and authentication. If that fails, if there's no keys that are set up that work, then the next authentication mode it likes to go to is password. So then it asks for the password. We exchange a packet, and it authentication succeeded. So we're in now to the server. It connected. Authentication was successful. So then it starts doing its file generation, file transfers. And the only file we had, obviously, for this is a simple put. So it did the put to their server, and you always get, and there's the file name that it created as it was supposed to, um, and it was 100% successful. So it did transfer fine. Let's go back out here and look. Let's just do a refresh of this SFTP server, and there's our file. It sent it successfully. So there's a working example of doing an outbound single file transfer. And let's back out of this. I think there's a couple of more things to cover. I know I feel like I'm rushing through a little bit because I know a big majority of this is inbound file processing, and that's covered in a different video. Option 6 will be for the the inbound monitors. Other video, maintain application triggers. This is the big one right here, 7. We've got these individual FTP IDs set up, and we can do transfers right out of this maintenance menu. But the whole point of managed file transfer is to integrate transfers into your applications at key trigger points where after you generate a file, you want it sent automatically. Option 7 allows you to do this. So we jump in here, and what we got is we've got a little business entity codes to identify what area of your business are you working with. These are the inbound monitors that we have set up. We've got, I mentioned there's going to be an error monitor that we're going to use and a miscellaneous. Basically, the way this works is you set up these control records, and whenever the monitor executes, it's going to look for the control record here, and it's going to execute the SFTP one for this particular FTP ID. So whenever it wakes up, it says, okay, give me the SFTP control record and execute this FTP ID for it and these sequence numbers, and go establish your connection and run all the gets and puts for that. It's always going to be gets, obviously, with inbound monitors. So it's going to process all your gets, bring your files into the IFS, and then it's a two-step process. That ends, and then the monitor goes to this particular FTP ID for your IFS processing. And the reason for that is sometimes you may want to bring file names in bulk that meet a wildcard range. So with a wildcard range, you'll typically need some custom program put in to, here I am getting into the inbound monitor stuff when I was going to save it for another video. Let me just finish this thought here and we'll move on. Basically, it's going to run a custom program you write to process the files on the IFS, because you may have some files you want to process into accounts receivable, accounts payable, or into your pay module. Any particular area of your business, you can run this custom program once it's on the IFS and pull it on in. You can also forego any processing and just stick it right into a DB2 file. So that's the inbound monitors, but this serves the same purpose for any other FTP outbound SFTP you want to set up. You can set up the control record here. We've got 2 small programs that you would simply embed in your applications to pull this control record and then also pass that control record to the SFTP program that's going to run the FTP ID script. And that's how we integrate into your business. That's about all we can do from our end. Your business and application layer is yours. This is the tool that would allow you to do that. The programs are included in this, and we can help consult with you on how to use those and the strategic ways of embedding those into your application layer. Last thing, MFT inquiry. This is just a snapshot. It's an inquiry of all the activity of what's been running. So I just set this product up before I did the demo. I did a demo myself, and obviously it was a success. The first moving part of that particular outgoing SFTP, it was the file being moved from IBMi DB2 database up to the IFS, and that's this record here. So it says it's successfully transferred the local IBMi file right here, this library, this file member, into the IFS file at this location. And then step two was actually after it's there, the SFTP took place, and it obviously picked up the IFS file, and then it put it out to the remote server. So if we look at that, transfer executed successfully, read to the actual FTP ID transfer log for details pertaining to the SHT, because there's all the details there. And you can jump to that again here. This is no different than taking the 22 from the FTP ID maintenance, jump to the bottom, and here's your log details about how the SFTP was conducted. So that's a very quick overview of all the moving pieces to this application and process. We hope you enjoy it. There's a lot more that goes on here than just what I jumped through very quickly. If you got questions, send us an email or a comment or something. We'll get back to you. But we're going to save the second video for inbound monitoring. And so stay tuned for that. Thanks for your time.